That morning, actually, I was on the way to a staff meeting at City Hall, and I'm an avid listener of NPR, so I had NPR on, and I heard this news about a plane hitting the Twin Towers. So I'm thinking, well, there's some kind of accident, some small plane, somehow made a mistake and hit the Twin Towers. But kept listening and finally got to the meeting and kept hearing news. And I don't know whether or not they had the television on when I got there, or I asked that they turn the TV on so we can see what was going on. And just a short time later, there was obviously the second plane, which was a commercial plane, and obviously, at that point it was understood that it was not a mistake. At that point, it was clear that there was some kind of incident taking place. Nobody knew, the origins of it, just knew that it happened. So, if I look back on that time, I would just remember a bunch of shock and disbelief that something like this was happening intentionally. As I said, the initial thought was, first thing was a small plane. Second thing is, when it was made clear that it was a large plane, you still think it's some sort of mistake. But after that second plane that you can visibly see, by that time we were looking at the news reporting, and you could see that it was very intentional. So we understood that we had a different circumstance. A group of people that were on one plane that decided that, look, we're gonna fight this, and thank God for them, because my belief is that they had a very sensitive target, and that those people kept that from happening. And I often wonder, frankly, if I had that opportunity, would I be able to take advantage of it? And I think I would, because shortly after the whole incident, I was traveling to Washington, D.C. on a plane, and the new rule was that you could not get out of your seat within 50 miles of D.C. And this person got out of his seat, and I'm thinking, man, you know what? We're going to have to do something with this guy, And thankfully that guy sat back down. But I was thinking, yeah, we're going to have to do something, which did believe that I would have in those circumstances. You never know in law enforcement response and the fire service response. It was obvious at that time that while everybody was trying to get away from the mayhem caused by the planes and the tower was falling, it was very clear that law enforcement and the fire service were heading the other way to see what can be done to mitigate the whole problem. So that was a proud time for law enforcement and the fire service. That and the fact of the matter is, I know that those people that did it, they did it without thought. They just did it because that's what they do. They didn't have a second thought about climbing up those stairs in that tower to go out and try to rescue people. And I know that the fire service gets a lot of credit, but there were EMS, there were law enforcement, there was everybody doing the same. Frankly, we tend to forget that there was a very significant domestic terrorist attack in Oklahoma, several years prior to the 9/11 attack. So we were made aware of, attacks for various reasons. Now we had no reason to suspect or be prepared for international attacks. And so you think about, well, what is it that you worry about in Orangeburg? A city about 15,000 people, county about 100,000 people. Why would you worry about that? But from the local perspective, we needed to be hyper vigilant because, from a strategic perspective, it was my thought that if a group of terrorists really wanted to make the United States feel insecure, that they would come to a small town America and disrupt small town America, because at that point, it would be very difficult for you to have a really good plan to defeat it, because it would be difficult to place your resources in small town America, unlike New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, those places like that. But we were all hyper vigilant, because nobody wanted anything to happen locally.
Sure.
So I think we were very hyper vigilant, and one of the biggest benefits was, as I mentioned, I was appointed to both the federal task force for counterterrorism and a state task force for counterterrorism. The state task force focused more on the fire service, more than the federal. But the one thing that happened is that we shared information, and we shared. We made equipment available to each other. There was a big equipment inventory that was done at the state level to say, well, what assets does Orangeburg have? And if there was a significant incident that took place in Charleston, could we assist Charleston? Could we assist Beaufort? Could we assist Columbia? So, there's a cataloging of assets that happened. And again, the biggest thing was the information sharing, I guess.